If you've been with the channel at any point in the last, say 7 years, you know that I'm a fan of Grand Power pistols. And if you read our website, GBGunsDepot.com, you know that their importer, Global Ordnance, recently had a heck of a deal on these. And so we finally have the one model that has eluded me for all these years. The P45L Tabletop Review and Field Strip coming up next on GBGuns. Now, if you're new to Grand Powers, don't worry. I know a thing or two. Big fan of these guns. Very excited to finally get my hands on them. Get this out of its bag. And they usually come quite well greased, as this one is. Big old long slide 45. We got one mag in the gun and 2 additional mags in the case. Up top, we have our bore brush, an additional front sight post, and the tool for getting that swapped out, as well as the manual. I enjoy looking at the manuals because they give us an idea of how well the company wants us to know and understand their firearm, and that's shown through the care that goes into the manual. Grand Power manuals are full color and feature photos. If you're curious about specs, you can either check our article in the pinned comment, or you can pause here. Hopefully the camera will focus for you to read there. But this is the big boy. The instructions here are fairly straightforward and minimalist. It does include full color photos for the takedown, which is great because takedown of a Grand Power seems to scare some people. But it's really not that hard, and I'll show you how to later on. Let me get this stuff out of the way. There it is. I took the liberty of wiping some of that shipping grease off this thing. Big old beefy gun. Now, the larger frame guns like the P45L and the P40L, which is the 10mm version, do not come with interchangeable back straps. They went with this sort of intermediary. These thinning contours here are what's on the largest back strap that comes on the other Grand Powers, and yet the angle and general size is kind of in between. So it's sort of a general purpose thing. But before we get too much into that, let's show clear. And you can see, nice big bore. There's nothing in there. And we'll check for magazine eject or release. And with all Grand Powers, it certainly ejects. That's the gun upside down and slide to the rear. You also notice I'm doing this from the other side. That's because all now 20 models of Grand Powers that I've ever reviewed have had completely ambidextrous controls. Awesome, awesome. Even if you're right hand dominant, wanting to train your other dominant hand, or if you're like me, sometimes I find the reach to the magazine release from this gun is a bit far. Double stack 45 is a fat magazine to get a grip around. However, my middle finger can hit the mag release on this side very easily, and so that's what I've come to like on guns like these. This is not a decocker model. Haven't seen many of those in the States in quite some time, but you have the option of cocked and locked. You can decock manually and have double action. While we're here, why don't we do our trigger talk? This is one of the things that I love most about Grand Powers, and part of how I shoot them so well, because the gun makes it easy. So we have light take up to a clean wall. That's the brake, no over travel, and our reset. That's it. And it takes you right back to the wall for another clean break. The double action is continuously heavy. It doesn't stack so much, but it is certainly a heavy trigger pull. Now onto our regular tabletop. Coming up front, we can see that nice bright stainless barrel. The stainless barrel guns haven't been made in a couple years. This gun itself is stamped 2020. They've moved to a nitride-like coating. But you can see we have a little bit of recess there to protect the rifling, a little bit of beveling. It's just a big, beefy gun. If you're wondering about this slide shape, you might have also noticed when I locked this to the rear, that barrel did not tilt. This is a rotating action, not like the Beretta version. The Grand Power action is unique, but very cool setup that I'll explain as we get deeper into this. We have a single rail slot texturing on the front of the trigger guard and a little bit of a hook for people who want to shoot with that support hand forward. Nice radiusing here underneath. Trigger guard. I've run Ground Powers at Frontside, I've run them at Thunder Ranch. I've been shooting them heavily for years and never had a Glock knuckle type issue. Texturing on the front strap is horizontal lines, which is as it should be since the gun's going to try to rock in your hand. And then we have some light texturing here on the rest of the grip. You notice these contours here that also helps shield the magazine release so it doesn't get bumped accidentally. Underneath, not much of a magwell flaring, just a slight bit there because double stack single feed magazine, like most double stack guns, the mag serves as your magwell. There's that contouring and narrowing in the back. Slide to frame fit, very tight. Up front, very tight. And the barrel locks in rock solid as well. See, we've got 3-dot sights. Now, it is one of the downfalls to the Ground Powers is it's a proprietary cut in the rear. The front cut is CZ75, but not all CZ75 sights fit it, so it takes a little bit of adjusting to try to change the sights, unfortunately. On the right side of the gun, you can see we've got all of our controls. Demonstrate that they work. That's the lock. There's the release. There's the safety, and you already saw that the magazine release works. Next, we'll field strip this thing and take a look inside the P45L, and I'll show you the trick to field stripping the Ground Power. Field strip the Ground Power, we're first going to want to check for clear. And it's always easiest done with the hammer already back, that way you're not fighting the mainspring. We've got takedown tabs on both sides. Those both need to be pulled. I like to hook my middle finger in the trigger guard to give something to pull against, because we're going to pull the slide all the way to the rear, lift up, and bring the slide forward, like so. Looking inside here, you can see part of what makes Ground Powers unique. This is something they've been doing for decades, and only recently have other guns followed suit. This is a billet stainless steel chassis that the trigger mechanism and everything else sits in. Now, unfortunately, this design came about before it was cool to have interchangeable guns, so the frame is still the thing that's serialized and considered the firearm by US law, but it all sits inside this chassis, and in the back there are the initials of who assembled this chassis. So if there's anything wrong with this and it has to get go back seriousness to the chassis builder, there's the guy who built it. It's his fault. You also see this piece here, which is too shiny for you to see it moving, but this is actually a roller bearing that the barrel pivots on. We also have a nicely polished, large feed ramp. Man, forget how big 45 is until after shooting 9mm for so long. This polished cam surface here is what does the rotating there, and how this thing locks and unlocks. Beautiful done barrels. You can see nice beveling all the way around to help ensure easy feeding. And when we look at our slide, although the slide appears to be massive from the outside, there's not much metal in here. Most everything has been removed that can be, and there's our safety plunger for folks who are curious about that. Internal extractor as well to help keep grime out of the way. Now we'll take a look at chamber fitment. I lucked out as I was able to dig a box of Nosler Match 45 out. Didn't even realize that I had it. I've been using Nosler ammunition for my chamber fitment test because back when I was testing ammunition out of 65, maybe 70 loads, this was the most consistent stuff that I saw. I've been down to the factory and seen them make their brass and their bullets, starting with ingots. Everything's done in-house there. So excellent quality control. So it's the fairest way to test for the chamber fitment. As we drop this in here, we're going to listen for a nice plunk, like that. And then what we're looking at is how much brass is exposed beyond those bends. That's the strongest part of the brass. Of course, the extractor needs to get to it. And you can see there is nothing. Ground Power has the most complete chamber support that I've ever seen on a gun. The reason why you'd want that is should you have a case fail, either it's reloaded brass or low quality, something wrong, overpressure, the brass is going to want to rupture where it's not supported. So on like a Gen 3 Glock or something like that, where it's not supported underneath, it sends that blast into your hands. When you have something like this, it sends it down the barrel and out the gun. So as I've come to expect, spectacular chamber support there with the Ground Power. Reassembly is the inverse of disassembly, of course. I'll show you how I do it. drop the barrel in, and easiest way to know which way is supposed to be facing which direction is to get the serial number in the window, like it is when it's normally set, rotate it until it unlocks and falls forward. You want to leave it in this position. This next part can be tricky. Sometimes I like to do it resting the heel of the gun against my stomach. I'm going to try to do it without any support so it shows better on camera for you guys. But what we're going to be doing is the same thing, hooking onto here, pulling down on the takedown levers. For some reason, for me, always makes it a little bit easier. We're going to get our spring, which you notice is not captured, so you can tune it if you want. Guide rod started, and you want to pull the slide all the way to the rear and set it down and then release it forward. I was not able to do it without having some support on the heel of the gun. Just my left shoulder is blown out from time in the Army, so I'm going to have to do it against my stomach. But I promise I will show you guys in the range video how I do that. Now it's all back together. A quick functions check. And speaking of the range video, when we get this out to the range, this big boy, you'll see our absolute first shots out of the gun ever firing this thing. Cold shot first impressions from both myself and Miss Tia. These are 10 round magazines, if anyone was wondering. 45 is big. Then we'll do full magazine plus one, see how these magazines and this gun run while fully stuffed. We will do our trademark what's for dinner test to see what the gun eats or doesn't eat. Sights and trigger control on our spinner, which will be interesting. Nice long barrel 45. Then some practical accuracy, 5-shot groups from 7 yards, followed by our concluding thoughts. Speaking of long barrels, a point that I'm throwing in a little bit late here. So my first pistol was a 1911 5-inch 45. When I moved to polymer guns, I thought I'll stick with 45. It's one caliber, it's what I know. It's before I realized the cost of ammunition adding up. So I got a very short barreled 45. I later learned just how sensitive 45 ACP is to barrel length. And part of that's because you have to remember 45 ACP was developed as a modernization to 45 Colt. So it just needed to have the same velocity, roughly the same energy as 45 Colt, which originally was a black powder cartridge. So as a result, even though a 45 case is big, it needs lots of barrel to get velocity up and deliver its energy and do what it's supposed to do. So when you go to a short barrel 45, you sometimes lose that energy. Modern ammunition, I hope, is engineered to perform better from those lower velocities, but if you're going to go 45, you might as well go 5-inch or as close to it as you can get if you want to get the full force out of the 45. The other reason why we chose the long slide model is that longer sight radius, and as I've found, generally the longer your slide is, the smoother your recoil impulse is. So since this is going to be not a carry gun for us, it's going to be a fun gun to shoot. Let's get one that's really fun to shoot. Anyways, nice to have this missing piece to my Ground Power collection. If you guys want to learn more about Ground Power, including our factory visit, we have links for that in the Ground Power playlist. We also intend to go back to that factory as soon as we can. That concludes the P45L Tabletop Review and Field Strip. Thanks for watching.